Welcome to today's webinar. It was so excitingly called Stewardship, so I appreciate that 10 of you have logged on to sign up. Please go ahead, feel free during this time to interrupt me and ask your questions. I will also try to get to if a chat pops up and you have a question there, go ahead, but I'm one that just please interrupt me. I'm Jen Williams. I currently serve in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And one of my specialties at my last appointment was I attended the Church Institute on Finance and Administration. And so I took 4 weeks of continuing ed to specialize in pretty much administration and financial aspects of the church. So today we're talking about really generosity, not just stewardship. I prefer the term generosity because we frame it as a spiritual discipline. You know, Stephen Foster doesn't even use stewardship or generosity in his book, Celebration of Disciplines, but we've started to talk more in the 21st century about the importance of generosity. It is a spiritual discipline. And so here's a quote from Bishop Schnase in 5 Practices of Fruitful Congregations. People talk about putting God first and having God at the center of their lives. But in actual practice, most of the person's major decisions are made without reference to God's will or priorities. Tithing is a spiritual discipline that puts God first. Tithing takes enormous trust in God, and tithing strengthens faith. So we're going to be talking about through this really how we help grow people in the spiritual discipline to hit the tithe as not an end goal in itself, but a beginning point, and really use that spiritual discipline, that practice of generosity. If you want, after this, you can always email me. I do have a comprehensive bibliography of sources that I've used for this. This comes from Not Your Parents' Offering Plate, anything really written by Horizon Stewardship. That would be Cliff, Cliff Christopher, and anything by Scott McKenzie continually talk about, this is in both Why People Give, Not Your Parents' Offering Plate, and Rich Church, Poor Church. And it really comes down to 3 foci as to why people give. First and foremost, these days, mission and vision. Now, why people give can be different based upon generations, but as we move into the postmodern era further, more and more important is mission and vision, tying the giving to what is important, how people change lives. The second reason that people give to the church is the regard for staff leadership. This is both paid and unpaid. Unfortunately, for most of us as pastors, or fortunately, part of our role is to be chief fundraiser. When we lead a church, they put their trust in us. And so giving also is reflective of how much they trust you as the pastor, the staff, and the lay leadership. What has the track record been with transparency in the not just in the financial aspects, but every aspect of leadership of the church? And then the third reason that people give is how much can they trust the institution itself? What is your transparency like in how you communicate finances, and then how you use the finances? So these are the 3 areas of why people give in the 21st century and why they give to the church. One thing that the leaders who scheduled these webinars wanted to focus on was, what are we tracking and how do we as pastors count? And really, what do we know about people's giving? It was a common misconception, especially when I was going through seminary in the 90s, that pastors don't know the giving. It's a secret. But we count what we value. We count what we value. Common quote from Andy Stanley. And one of those is, you can tell what the church of the United Methodist Church of the 21st century is counting because of vital signs. It's required of us every week. And one of those is how much is given on a weekly basis. I have found vital signs helpful. In my last church, I was responsible for the budget, and you could track it. And I could tell you that first Sunday, it's communion. People always come out. It's always the highest giving week of the month. Interestingly, I would have thought that people were on an every other week giving cycle. And so third week would have been the second highest, but actually incorrect. Second was next. And I always saw a dip at that particular congregation in third week giving. That allows you to look at how you spend in a month. And so we track what we value, and then we can make decisions based upon that. So vital signs can be and is a useful tool that you can look up your church and track that giving. You can then also look at yearly trends based upon that. Vital signs allow you to pull up a whole year. And it allows you to look at your spending when times were tough, or in the summer, don't make a big purchase because you know fourth quarter's coming, and that's always the biggest giving quarter of the year. Invest in a good church database system. One, there are legal requirements. We are required as nonprofits to report to the donors anything over $100 donation throughout the year. If they've given less, if they give $99, you do not need to give them an end of the year statement. But if they give 100 or more, there is a legal requirement, and a church database system helps you with that as well. It allows for easy follow-up. And then consider, how are you looking at the in-depth trends of your church? I have actually a former parishioner who still creates Excel spreadsheets for me. So I can look at monthly giving, I can look at weekly giving, and giving by attendee. Then you can begin to track, how is this April over last April? Where was Easter last year? Where's Easter this year? And begin to look at, you can look at yearly trends. You can also look at, how are you doing? February, always a down month in giving, particularly for us in the Northeast because of weather. But you can look at, if weather was the same as last year, and this February, the weekly giving or the giving per attendee is less, what's going on in your congregation? What do you need to know? And as we track what we're giving, it's important for us to know our demographics. Who are your top givers? Yes, I highly encourage to look at those stats. If generosity is a spiritual discipline, we're called to make disciples. A part of growing disciples is looking at how are they doing in the spiritual gift discipline of tithing, of generosity. So who are your top givers? How many do you have? Another useful tool that I have found has been the step chart. You can find this information in the old Consecration Sunday literature. I'm sure they have some stuff here at Discovery Place. I also have this. Again, any of these resources, I'd be glad to forward on to you to help you with this. But the step chart looks at, what do they give in particular areas, $0 to $5? How many people do you have who give nothing a year? How many do you have that have $5 to $10 a year, a week, 10 to 20? What you can do is with that, if you track that quarterly or yearly, you can begin to try to push everyone up one step. That's a way to grow the spiritual discipline, to talk about it in a very tangible way, because some weeks it's simply, if they give up one Starbucks coffee, one pumpkin latte, they can take a step up and they've added a commitment with God in the process. You are pastors. We are the chief fundraiser of our nonprofits. Knowing what people give helps us in countless ways. It helps us raise more money. We can look at those top donors, find out what's important to them, and begin to focus how we speak to them, how we encourage them about giving in the church. For a person to be able to give, they must know two things. The capability, they must have two things, the capability and the will. So who in your congregation is capable, and more so, who has the will? Your top givers are already committed to the church. So what does it look like for them to tie more closely in? Treasure and heart go together. One of the things that we worked on in my first year at my new church is a leadership covenant. And part of our leadership covenant is you pray, you attend worship when you are in town, and we require that our leaders tithe or are working toward the tithe. So now as we come to a second year of the church conference schedule, as we look at who steps onto leadership, we will only raise up those who are capable and already have the will. Those who are in the top 10 to 20% of givers. And I'd also like to be clear, knowing the stats tells you where people are. I was at a very large, upwardly mobile congregation, and always in the top 20% was one of our families who attended and used our food pantry. But she was a tither. She gave as much as our doctors and lawyers, some of them. That tells you about capability. That's a person who is committed to God, who has the practice of the spiritual discipline first, who has then the ability to lead the congregation in a new way. Again, if you have any questions, please pipe in. So why should pastors know the numbers? Get into your database, dive into Servant Keeper. If you don't know how to use it, have your office manager, your secretary run the numbers for you. But here's why. First and foremost, generosity is a spiritual issue. Who is growing in their faith? Who can be challenged more? As I already mentioned, it identifies the committed. This is to allow a standard to be raised and then to pull people into leadership who are already committed. You might, by looking at the numbers, find someone who is one of your top givers who is serving nowhere in the congregation. Well, they're tied in already. They're committed. They're giving. So where are their other spiritual gifts? Where could their other spiritual gifts be used? And then also, I have found that knowing the numbers is a pastoral care opportunity. I'm particularly notified when people with e-giving, when it comes off the top and we do, it's called ACH bank transfers. They have to notify someone in the office to change those numbers. That person in the office always notified me. Someone has gone up, someone has gone down. That's a pastoral care opportunity. Last fall, I was notified someone cut their giving in half. All right, I sit down and I ask the questions. Are they losing commitment to the church, or is something going on in their life? So I can do pastoral care follow-up, and in that respect, I found that the husband had just lost his job, and he was out of work, and he was going back to school to study something new. Well, that's a pastoral care opportunity because they're in a major life change. That's an opportunity for a note, a follow-up, and simply on a Sunday morning, I hear your life circumstances changed. Pastoral care. As we look at moving on, so are there any questions on demographics before I move on? I realize I'm making the new pastor mistake, and I think I'm talking pretty fast. So I'll try to slow down now and calm down. But if you have any questions, go ahead and put them on chat or just interrupt me. Everyone should be unmuted on my end that you can ask those questions. So we've talked about the spiritual discipline of generosity. We've talked about demographics, why you should know, different ways that you can track. Excuse me, and then what that tracking means for the life of the church and you as pastor. And so then it becomes, how are we communicating with our people? As the church now in the 21st century, it used to be in the 1970s and 80s, we weren't competing for dollars. The church was the first place you gave, and then maybe you wrote a check to UNICEF or United Way or Red Cross. But now, those nonprofits have become our competition for every dollar out there. And so, how are we communicating? Are we still using the same tools we did in the 70s? And what can we learn from the nonprofits out there that are doing well in a difficult economy for giving? So the first is, I highly recommend read Not Your Father's Offering Plate by Cliff Christopher. Not Your Parents' Offering Plate. It was published in 2008 by Abingdon Press. Great book. At annual conference just this year, Horizon Stewardship had a table, and I conned them into giving me 9 copies of the book for my new leadership council. So when it comes up, oh, we haven't heard about such and such, I could say, well, I gave you that book, highly recommend reading it. Not Your Father's Offering Plate. It breaks a lot of the myths of the church that the pastor shouldn't know, that giving is secret only by the person who puts it in the database and the person who counts it. What we should or shouldn't communicate in the bulletin, and how we send out our giving letters. So Not Your Father's Offering Plate, first place to start, first and best resource on stewardship and generosity. And then I highly recommend having your leadership read it as well. One of the things the book highlights is the different styles of communication. We often, and I'm guilty of this because I often say, hey, I don't have the time, and Not Your Father's Offering Plate rips that excuse to shreds, but we send out one letter. We may do it at the end of the year. Some of us may do it quarterly, but it's one letter, and it's based upon one particular generational thought process. And so who are you communicating to? That giving database, whether it be Servant Keeper, iCloud, whatever you use, can help you break down your givers and then how you communicate to them. World War II, those are fading in our congregation, but they very much give based upon the should mentality. They were raised in institutions. You give to institutions. So they want to know just the facts. What are the facts? What are we doing? Why should I give? Baby boomers, they like a little motivation. Again, they need to be reminded why they give. But anyone under Generation X, millennials, the up and coming Zs, that's that vision-based giving we talked about. And so how can you hit all of those generations at one time? One thing the Not Your Father's Offering Plate highly recommends is consider giving level communication. So when you send out a quarterly letter or the end of the year letter that has their giving statements, give the top 20%, you write a very different letter than the bottom 10% of your givers. The lower 10% who are giving maybe $2 a week, they give $20 a month. For them, it's a challenge. They need to hear the vision and that God is challenging them to step up and what that means for their life and the lives of others. Your top 20%, they're already giving. They need to be thanked. They need to be reminded of what the church is doing, but thanked in particular. And never, never, never put weekly giving in the bulletin. It actually discourages giving on both sides. I grew up in a church, an old, old Methodist church. We had the wood pictures on both sides of the pulpit. And on one side it had, you could slide in the number for the hymns each week. And on the other side it had weekly giving and attendance. Those days are over. Putting the weekly giving or what's needed to meet budget in the bulletin actually discourages giving. If you're not meeting your weekly needed, it literally discourages people and they say, well, why should I give? We're not making it anyway. If you exceed your weekly needed giving to meet budget, it actually discourages people because people say, look, they have too much money and all the church wants is my money. Don't put it in the bulletin. Consider, how do you communicate it in other ways? I know of a church that has just gone through some financial difficulties, misappropriations. And so there's been that push to have it back in the bulletin. And we've been talking, what are other ways? Okay, we could communicate it once a month because they have a need. They have a felt need because for pastoral care reasons because of what they've been through in the last few years. Look at, okay, do you send out a special email monthly? Do you put it in your weekly email, but do it once a month? And then how do you write those quarterly letters to reflect the need, to get the information out, still to be transparent so they trust the church? One of the reasons, going back to one of the first slides, why people give. But then, again, you don't want to discourage giving. And simply the numbers discourage it. Say thank you. As we talk about communication, we need to say thank you. Especially now, you see, remember the World War II generation, they didn't need to be thanked so much. They were raised on the mindset that this is just what you do. It's a should in life. But your modern givers love to be thanked. Everyone, frankly, loves to be thanked. And so how can you do that? A quarterly letter that starts out, thank you. Here's what you've accomplished. End of the year, consider new ways. Everyone's going to get that giving letter that has their end of the year statement. But what unique can you do? A personal note to your top 10 or 20. An email to your top 20%. You can generate those letters about Thanksgiving, generate those numbers, and begin to write those and send them on January 1, January 5. Send them in the first month of the year. But don't underestimate the power of a personal note. As well, one of the things I do is when there's ever a gift given to the church of over $1,000, I have the counting team notify me immediately. That person needs thanked. Another way to do that pastoral care, I had a shut-in, just give a huge sum. I was notified, wrote her a note. She was able to come to church for the first time this summer. She watches every week online, so she's committed, but a personal note can go a huge way. And then private meetings. This is something I got from Give Credit Where Credit Is Due from, this is what Mike Slaughter has practiced and talked about for years at Ginghamsburg. His planting pastor, Rosario Picardo, who's now moved on to form Mosaic churches out in the Ohio's, talk about this. And he just talked about it at Navigate, for those of you who were there in Camp Hill 2 weeks ago. Private meetings. Consider the first quarter of the year. Who are your top 10? Your top 10 givers are the most committed. You've got them already. Have one-on-ones with them. Take them to coffee, take them to lunch. What are they passionate in the church and why are they giving already? Find out those whys to help you guide the church in that year. Consider doing it as you practice and you get ready for January 1 to look at your goals. So why are your top 10 already giving? They're committed for some reason. What are those areas? And then those are positives. How can you build on those as you get ready for 2020? Mike Slaughter and Rosario Picardo talk about, they do it every year. Appetizers at the parsonage for your top 10%. Your top 10% givers, have them at the parsonage. Have a time where you just mingle, and then you've got 10, 15 minutes of an audience that is committed. They're captive, they're in your home, and you have the opportunity then to spread vision. Again, a great time to do that is in third quarter or early in first. Get those givers tied in, hear what's important, and then speak the vision. Where are you going based upon the passions of the people that are already there? Not saying that that's the only place you go, but you've got people committed. Maybe you'll find out one is committed for this small ministry you didn't think anybody cared about. Well, there's an opportunity to spread vision. And then another option is have a spaghetti dinner at the church. Have your council cook the meal and invite your top 20% for a church dinner. If you invite everyone out you look at the church year, for church conference in November and December, do it after Easter in that downtime, but do it as a fellowship and an opportunity to discuss the church and where you're going in the second half of the year. Just some ways, again, to say thank you. Also, don't forget to use in all of your communications, for your private meetings, for your one-on-ones, pictures. Use your PowerPoints. We can take video on iPhones and edit it quickly these days. End of the year letters, quarterly letters, fill them with pictures, people doing ministry and changing lives. That's another way to say thank you, because their giving helped to make that happen. All right, we're about halfway through. Any comments or questions? Okay, another helpful resource I've found in learning about giving and generosity is the Rocket Company. It's a church resource company based out of Atlanta. Many of the founders were on staff at Andy Stanley's church, North Point. What they have done is they have a giving rocket. They charge based upon church size, and you work with your leadership through this to grow the giving of your church. One thing they talk about is a giving talk. I am so passionate about these now and see how they work, because again, it's that idea to take vision and to tie it to the offering. Right before you give and you take the offering, we stand up there often as pastors in our traditional services and we hold the plates, right? And then the hospitality teams come forward and we pass the plates out and they go and they take the offering. You have 3 to 5 minutes of a captive audience to present why people give. It's a short explanation of how the offering itself works. I currently do it because it's my passion. I plan it to what's going on in the church, what happened that week, or what's coming up that they help make possible. But you can have, you can train up lay people to do that. That's even more wonderful. An intentional, planned moment of your church. It's when we take the offering, it's not just, oh, another down transition time where it goes silent and you hear the bronze plates rattling. No, it's an intentional moment to speak into the lives of people about why they give and about how their giving, their living out spiritual discipline can change lives. So an example. Oh, okay. 7 reasons for giving talks. Again, this is from a blog on that website that I pulled up just to tell you the importance of this. It's a chance, not a change, chance to cast vision. You know, if your church is moving somewhere in particular, you have 3 minutes to talk about that and how people can partner with the church through their giving. It's a way to highlight all your different ministry areas. Again, what's that one that maybe no one knows about that's changing lives in amazing ways? Hey, did you know this? And you get to talk about. People won't give unless you ask. Especially today, there is no we should do this. Postmoderns do not like to be told what to do, and they need to know that their giving makes a difference. So ask people. Don't shy away from the ask and the big give, man. Step into it. God has given us this authority and right. I love to talk about money. Can you tell? It's a chance to educate. Sometimes your giving talk is on the spiritual discipline. Jesus talked about giving 66% of the time in the Gospels. Here's why. Giving will increase. This company has done the studies. Giving will increase if you tie that offering to how it's making a difference in the world. It attaches meaning to that open transition time, as I said. And again, simply a chance to say thank you. A simple giving talk. I actually did this summer. We have an early learning center that has a summer camp for middle schoolers who can't be home alone. One day those kids jumped up and wanted to dive into the Bible. It took them 6 weeks, but by Monday at 3 o'clock, they were ready. Miss Tina, what does the Bible say about this? You made that happen this week. 10 preteens were on fire for Jesus to know God's word because of what you do here in these moments. Thank you. For you, that here's another aspect to add in. For those of you who have already given like me, thank you. So that's why we give, because we're changing lives every day. And then you pass the offering plates out. It becomes, instead of a bad transition, a powerful moment to spread vision, to educate on God's word and the spiritual discipline. I'm so passionate. Things to remember as we wrap up of this communication. People like to be thanked. Always include the many diverse ways people give. So if you're handing out the offering, one of the things you can say is, because I never put anything in the offering plate, I have it taken out off the top in e-giving, direct deposit, whatever you call it at your church. Highlight that. Hey, right now, we're going to pass out the offering plates to change those teenagers' lives. Thanks to those of you at e-giving. You can pull up our app, or it's very easy to add to a website with a PayPal button that PayPal provides. You can pull up your phone and give on our website right now with PayPal. They take credit cards. And so we're going to take our offering right now. One new thing, this comes from, again, Not Your Parents' Offering Plate and the Giving Rocket. Everyone likes to give. Don't give an out. When I started in ministry, one of the large churches in our area that I was learning from as brand new out of seminary, did this thing where they would say, we're going to pass the offering plates now. If you're a visitor with us, please just be our guest. If it's a spiritual issue, generosity and giving, we give everyone the opportunity to give, just like we give everyone the opportunity to stand and sing, to take notes during the sermon, to participate in our announcements, our ministries. So give everyone the opportunity to give. Don't give an out. People want to give to what changes lives. And then preaching on generosity. Okay, so the first question. What comes to mind when you think of preaching on money? Boring. No, can't talk about that. They're going to stone me or throw me from the pulpit if I talk about money, right? No, we just bring in once a year a consecration Sunday speaker and they come do it. Instead, when you write your sermon series, when you go to sit down to write that sermon, what are your congregants, those who are sitting in your pews or your chairs, what are they struggling with during this sermon series? So not, I can't preach on money, but rather, what are people facing that I, as the preacher, can bring God's word to. So I love to preach on money, and I love writing generosity and stewardship sermon series. And so here's what I always think, and I always try to include. First and foremost, here in the US in the 21st century, debt. Many thanks to Dave Ramsey. I've done Financial Peace. I highly recommend it. One thing Rosario Picardo mentions is Crown Financial has a stewardship education program that I haven't looked into yet, but I hear is very good. People cannot give if they don't have the money. And the average credit card debt in America, not other debt, just credit card, is up to nearly $10,000, $9,900. If our congregants are that much in debt, they can't give. Debt overwhelms, it takes away from their relationship with God. We know one of the reasons couples get divorced is they fight over finances. So preach on debt. Adam Hamilton wrote a book called Enough, a great sermon series to do that first discusses how to live on what we've been given. Even before you can preach on giving the 10%, we in the 21st century have to teach people how to get out of debt. Let me also be clear, underlining this entire webinar is that pastors, we're called to give 10%. That's a non-negotiable for me. And so I'm leaning on that, because we can't preach tithing if we're not doing it. We can't preach getting out of debt unless we're actively doing it ourselves. If you're struggling with this, teach a financial piece in your church. Go through it with them. Be honest. My husband and I did it. It changed our relationship as we talk about money. So debt. If I do a 3-week sermon series, this is kind of the outline of a very simple 3-week sermon series for me. Debt. The second thing would be that enough from Adam Hamilton, contentment. So how do you begin to live on the 90%, the want versus need of it all? And then the third week for me is always the tithe. What does the God require? Micah. There's some great in the prophets about not tithing and being spit out of the community. Again, Jesus, 66% of the time. Why did he talk about money? Because it's our comfort, it's our safety net. We even call it things. It's our nest egg. It's the last vestige of where we give up control and we turn to God. So there's pretty much my November series every year. But I would also like to be clear, I work in tithing and giving at least 3 or 4 other times a year. Usually I always hit one Sunday in Lent. Lent of 2020, I'm doing I'm doing spiritual disciplines from Ash Wednesday to Easter Sunday. And so one of those weeks is going to be the spiritual discipline of generosity. You can work that in. I always work it in sometime in the summer or in May and June as people are going on vacation. How are they giving still? That's where you want to hit e-giving. Get them signed up for ACH so you're not missing that income, that opportunity for them to give while they're not in church. Have fun with it. Be Rich. That's a sermon series from Andy Stanley, very much on do more, give more, very similar to Adam Hamilton's Enough. These are just some of the logos I found online of how to flip around the idea of preaching on money. I love this. So I think November 2020, my sermon title is going to be sermon series, Under New Management. I love that. Trusting God's best with our time and money. That's a sermon series right there on serving, giving of themselves in the church, and giving to God. There you have it. Right there's a great and easy 2-week sermon series. I have one I'd be willing to share with you that I just did last year called What's in Your Wallet? Then before your sermon each week, you show a different Capital One commercial. Just have fun. So I have that sermon series. I'd be willing to share that with you. Again, if you email me. I have weekly, daily readings for it. I have weekly devotional that goes in the worship folder, kind of a prepackaged deal. You don't have to pay Andy Stanley or Adam Hamilton for it. I'd be glad to share it with you. Just please pass on and give me a little credit, I hope. So that's just have fun. The world's your oyster in a good sermon series. So we're coming up on fourth quarter, partly why the conference scheduled this webinar right now, because fourth quarter is our most critical time in giving. It is when the giving is the highest statistically in every church, the fourth quarter. It's also when attendance goes up. When they're there, they'll at least give something. Again, that I'm hitting on the importance of e-giving and automatic, you can take credit cards as well. I highly recommend, we're in the process of redeveloping ours. PayPal for nonprofits has a very cheap rate, and I hear Square right now has one of the cheapest rates. There may be better, crowdsourced on Facebook to find out the others for who takes the best credit cards. But right now my church is in the transition to take PayPal. Fulton was very expensive. So fourth quarter is your perfect time to emphasize those different ways to give. But there are other critical areas and ways you can give. It was always a Christmas letter. I've also seen churches put out towards the end of the year, we're so-and-so behind in our giving. If everyone could give an extra $100 this Sunday, or on Sunday, December 20th, we'll be able to meet our budget. How demoralizing to send out one of those letters. We're 10% behind, we're 20% behind. Please give, as it's Christmas. No, I think I'm going to talk about it later, but Ginghamsburg did, and then they put it out for everyone. And I know Discovery Place has it. It's not your birthday to look at how do we give. But the Christmas letter can be critical and important. What's your vision? That's your opportunity to lay out your goals for 2020 to get people interested. You also have holiday specific times that people are already thinking about giving. Right? At Christmas, everyone will sign up or bring tons of food to give a Christmas dinner to people. Okay, they're already thinking about giving. How can we capitalize on that? And then the opportunity, I'm going to talk about a special campaign. This is where you lay out, you plan it. It's got to be planned now, sometime in September, early October at the latest, to look at the timeline to lay it out well. So I'm going to dive into each of these. Okay, the Christmas letter. This allows you to brand. The year that It's Not Your Birthday came out. You know, they provide, Ginghamsburg provided a logo. There was a study with DVDs. The whole church could do it. Branding. Make it stand out. You can do it that everybody brings the envelope for Christmas Eve. I also want to highlight, you have to spend money to make money. I love to have envelopes, the little envelopes that we have, that are the pew envelope size. But don't just buy the plain, or have them reproduced with your logo for Christmas Eve. Make it easy, make it stand out. Send the letter. I remember back in the day, yes, I'm not old, Cokesbury used to sell letterhead with the matching envelopes. That's awesome. With modern day printers, we can do that ourselves these days. So brand your letter, brand your envelope. Hey, if you want, even brand the outside envelope that you send it in. Self-addressed stamped envelope that you put in it, even better. Can get highly expensive, but again, you got to spend money to make money. Statistics will show if you do that, you'll get more in return. Set the date. Do it as a special Sunday. Fourth Sunday, if you celebrate Advent, fourth Sunday of Advent, last Sunday before Christmas, we're going to all bring these in. And then by Christmas Eve, we're going to announce this great offering and what we're going to do with it and how you're going to change lives with it. Because have what you're going to do with it in the email itself. Email reminders for that one Christmas letter. Holiday specific, this is increasing as we go digital more and more, because I'm going to go from right to left, however you're looking at it, I'm going the wrong way. End of the year giving. Now, the tax laws recently changed under President Trump. This will, they're predicting, affect end of the year giving for all nonprofits, because most people are not itemizing anymore. But when people used to itemize, they needed to hit these different income caps. So you may want to contact an accountant in your church and sit down, because an end of the year giving letter can still become valuable. What they're saying is, you now, to hit the giving cap for your high capacity givers, what they're going to end up doing to get the most tax bang for their buck is give 2 years in one. So it would mean that in December 2019, one of your givers is going to give what they would give in 2020 and what they would give in 2019 and take a huge tax break that year and take nothing in 2020. So there you can identify who are your very high capacity givers. You can talk to your accountants in your church to know where that threshold's going to be, and frame one letter to just a few individuals in your congregation. But people are still thinking about end of the year giving. So I think just a generic letter, maybe this year. You want to check out some church blogs about that. There's a church executive magazine. It's all online that will have more information coming up about that. I'm really excited to see where that's going. But definitely that 2-in-1 bang is gonna hit for your very high capacity givers. The Christmas letter, I had already talked about that a little bit. You want to tie that to Christmas Eve. Everybody comes on Christmas Eve, right? So if you send that letter out, you send it out to your generic servant keeper database. You know, you're just not sending that one to your giving units. Send that out as a generic. Those person who came 2 times in Advent, include them. Everybody wants to give to something that makes a difference. And then something to consider, hashtag Giving Tuesday. If you have, and I'm hoping to have it up and running, I haven't done this yet, so I'm hoping to have my PayPal on my website by then to highlight hashtag Giving Tuesday. Other nonprofits are starting this. There's Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and now hashtag Giving Tuesday. There you can plan your social media ahead of time. Keep the link on your in a post on your Facebook and Instagram. Make the picture a touch on Instagram, however that works, so that on hashtag Giving Tuesday, that they're hitting it from you. Send an email, boost it on your Facebook page, your Instagram, and make sure it's on your website so that people can give. Another way, if you already have this capacity, then send the people a special text message on Giving Tuesday. Remind them on Monday night, send it on Tuesday. See how you can tie it together. Do it as a digital appeal. Any comments or questions? And then the last thing I wanted to talk about is there's a special program that you can do at giving. Instead of just a Christmas Eve letter or a giving letter, do it as an entire system. The Rocket Company has a system with pre-made logos, pre-made emails and letters already for you. I've used it, and we saw when we used a special program at my last church, we saw giving increase by 30% for the Christmas letter simply by doing a systematic process that keeps it before the congregation and lets them know what's going on. So that would be the Christmas offering system. I've already talked about It's Not Your Birthday by Mike Slaughter. But you can double and triple your normal Christmas offering by doing this system. First thing you have to do, what's the vision? What's the why, as Andy Stanley says? You'll hear me say that a lot if you know me. What's the why? Why are you doing a Christmas letter? Just to meet budget? That's not passionate. That's not money sexy. What's going to draw people in? So what's the vision? If you're going to do a systematic 6-week system leading up to Christmas Eve, pick 3 initiatives, 3 tangible things in your church that would hit every aspect of the giving. So if you have a church loan, your baby boomers, your Pennsylvania Dutchers, they want to pay that loan off. For some people, that's giving sexy, I call it. For your postmoderns, not at all. Maybe it's your youth ministry. Maybe it's a mission. But hit kind of the 3 demographics as you choose 3 initiatives. But one theological push. We give because Christ came and died for us. We give because at this season, we give to everybody else, but we don't give to Jesus. Whatever it is. One theological push with 3 initiatives, vision-based initiatives. So set the vision and goals. Choose the date. Are you going to do that on 4th Advent? Or are you going to do it on Christmas Eve? One of the benefits of doing on 4th Advent or 3rd Advent, you can really have a celebration on Christmas Eve. If your church normally raises $2,000 and you double it to 4 or 6, 10,000 is very tangible. Set a big, hairy, or audacious goal, Jim Collins calls it. Man, throw that out there. And then when you hit it or you get very near that audacious goal on Christmas Eve, what kind of birthday party celebration are you having? So choose the date. And then walk back your timeline 4 to 6 weeks before. Send out an initial letter. Have the logo already chosen, and that just includes a letter where you're outlining your initiatives, when you're going to take it. They'll be hearing more, but how you're going to change lives. Then, after the letter goes out, every week, a single email, not tied with all your other church announcements. Like I send mine out every Friday. Don't do it on Friday. Some other time in the week so they're paying attention to it. About why. Highlight one unit, one of those vision initiatives each week. 1 week before, right before. You don't want to send it too early or they'll lose that envelope. 1 week before, send a follow-up letter with that envelope included. If it makes it easy, your church can afford it, you got a sponsor who will buy 100 stamps for you. Put a stamp on it so that they can send it in if they're not going to be there on that special Sunday or Christmas Eve. Other ideas to boost your Christmas Eve offering, consider step it back 10 weeks before. As your leadership chooses those 3 vision initiatives, ask them for a commitment. Remember, your leadership should be ideally the most committed of your congregation. So get them on board. Give them the opportunity. If you're going to set 10,000 as your goal and you can raise 2 before you even get to the congregation, would a celebration on that first Sunday you announce it to say, we've already raised 2. We've already raised $2,500. Also, you're the pastor. You're passionate, you're the leader and the chief financial fundraiser. So what are you going to give to make it happen? Consider a testimony. If you're using those ministry areas, have a testimony from each one. Have a testimony from a tither, simply about the importance of giving. Consider that on all of the 4 Sundays of Advent. And then you can even take it one step further. If your leadership is powerful about it, your ministry leaders in charge of those vision initiatives, go and speak to every small group in your church, choir, worship band, Yes, even those things that you wouldn't particularly think of as a small group. Every Sunday school class, young and old, give your kids an opportunity to give. Teach them about giving. Set a goal for your kids' Sunday school class, whatever you call it, worship zone, whatever. Set a goal for them. Hey, kids, if you got 10 kids, can they each raise $10 and that class do 100? What a celebration, man. You put that in your end of the year letter, January 1, that you send out. What other ways can you give? Oops, I'm done. So are there any questions that you have that I can answer for you? I am apparently 5 minutes early. Shoo, I was rushing there because I thought I had too much. How do you get your church to get started in e-giving? One of the panelists, hi Dilip. One of the panelists asks, how do you get your church to start e-giving? Use your leadership. Maybe one of them's a banker, and use your office manager. I've got a form that we just redid. I can give you the form from my last church to use. You want to set up ACH, and then one person a week is responsible for pulling that out in batches. So start by going to your local bank. Make sure that's set up in your banking portal that you can do ACH, and then have your financial secretary or someone like that. Dilip, if you know, you can always call me Dilip, but that's how you would get started. You first need to make sure your bank has the capability to do it. You need to create then an internal system. It doesn't have to be complicated. You need a form. You need a copy of a voided check. And then you need a way that you pull it out itself. A person, you can train up your counting teams each week to do those in batches. Our office manager does it, and at my last church, the office manager did it. So those are the systems. You need a person internally. Once you have it set up with the bank, you need a person internally. You need a form, and then you'll need them to fill that out with a voided check. And then the way you stop or you increase any of it is actually very simple. You can increase giving, decrease giving, or stop it altogether by simply an email. Email is considered an official record. They either email you, usually at both of my churches, they do the office manager. There's no need to go through me. I don't need to be a cog in the wheel. He lets me know if there's any changes, the office manager, but you print out that official email, it's time and date stamped. You then staple it to their original form and you make the changes. How do you get people enrolled? Start with yourself, then start with leadership, and then put it in the bulletin one Sunday. If you're doing I always put it in the bulletin, one of those sermon series to automate what you find passionate about. And you do it and you narrate it in biblical terms. The tithe is first up off the top. I've already automated mine so that it comes out off the top no matter what. It's not that I don't think about it, it's I take care of it at the beginning and I know God has it. So great question, Dilip. How do you get started? You also don't need a Sunday, Dilip, or anyone actually, to put it in the bulletin. Do it as soon as you get started. Make a slide for your media that scrolls about e-giving every Sunday and put it in the bulletin. Then when you do a sermon series about it, you have someone who has already automated their giving give their testimony on that Sunday. Okay, it is 2:00. Thank you to all of you who came in for this. I'm so glad you were here. Again, feel free to contact me if you need.